We think of an odyssey as a long trip, a series of wanderings, a journey filled with adventure and hardships. We all follow our own odyssey, our own voyage through life, searching for the serenity of home. Homer evoked this human odyssey in a poem of 12,000 lines, the first known masterpiece.
Sing to me of the man, Muse, the man of twists and turns, driven time and again off course once he had plundered the hallowed heights of Troy. Many cities of men he saw and learned their minds. Many pains he suffered, heart-sick on the open sea, struggling to save his life. Launch out on his story, Muse, daughter of Zeus. Start from where you will. Sing for our time, too.
Who was Homer? No one really knows. The question has baffled scholars for 3,000 years. The poet who is thought to have created the Western world's first great works of literature is an enigma.
Now this guy Homer, did he write both? Or is there a Homer who wrote either? Or is it someone else who happens to be named Homer who wrote these books and not the guy we think? Or is it a compendium that somehow came together during a period that we then associate with someone named Homer?
We call him Homer, but we know really nothing about him at all. There are all kinds of legends that he was a wandering schoolmaster who went around reciting his poems.
He may even have been a woman. That's what Samuel Butler suggested. But we don't know who he was, or some people even deny, some scholars even wonder whether there was a Homer.
So I don't know who Homer is. All I know is that I'm entertained magnificently by what he, she, they, or it offer, and that both the light and the heavy aspects of what they offer are an endless source of amusement and amazement to me.
Whoever he was, he evoked an heroic age in his works, a time of warrior kings and courageous seafarers, of a civilization rich in gold. Homer's epic poems have given generation after generation of Greek people enduring legends about their past. Of course, it was all myth, or so we thought. And then along came Heinrich Schliemann, a rich and highly controversial amateur archaeologist who thought Homer was telling history, and he set out to prove it.
Schliemann was, as you probably know, a self-educated merchant from Germany who, when he made it in the business world, he fulfilled his boyhood wish to become an archaeologist. And he did it with such excitement and such deep devotion to it that he memorized the Iliad and the Odyssey in the Greek original. He knew them by heart.
Schliemann went to Turkey to prove his theory and found what he believed to be the site of Troy. To this day, the find is disputed, but Schliemann was convinced. Next, he traveled to the Greek mainland, to the site of the ancient civilization at Mycenae, purportedly home of the legendary king Agamemnon. Schliemann began excavating just inside the city walls, looking for royal burial tombs. Months later, he struck gold, unearthing 30 pounds of delicate artifacts. Among them, a mask he claimed was the mask of Agamemnon.
He had wonderful success at Mycenae. In fact, at Mycenae, I believe, was his biggest success, because he found the only intact royal burials that we know. Almost overnight, he made every academic person who did not believe the stories of Homer rethink the question of historicity in Homer.
Schliemann had discovered evidence of a highly developed, warfaring Greek civilization that flourished between 1550 and 1100 BC, the Late Bronze Age. At the height of their influence, The Mycenaeans were established in what is now Sicily, Turkey, Egypt, and northern Greece. It was a rich and powerful civilization, but it ended abruptly. We aren't sure why. We only know that by the end of the 12th century BC, the Mycenaean world had disintegrated. Even its primitive alphabet, what we call Linear B, was lost. The experts suggest invasion, famine, or disease, perhaps a revolt. Some think economic decline inspired Mycenaean marauders to raid other lands and cities, and that the Trojan War might actually have been just 10 years of plunder. In any case, the storied fall of Troy coincided with the splintering and death of the Mycenaean Empire. There followed 4 largely unrecorded centuries, 400 years of darkness. What legends survived did so through a system of oral storytelling. Bards who memorized the tales added their own spin and sang them to audiences all over Greece. The rhythms and structure of music no doubt served as aids to the memorization of thousands of lines of poetry.
The word is what ties us to the past, and of course, long before there was writing, mothers were talking to their children, and that was the beginning of the oral tradition. And the oral tradition, which was perpetuated by the bards, was something that that preserved the essence of the story and allowed embellishment to meet the expectations of every particular audience.
We think Homer lived in the 8th century BC, 300 to 400 years after the collapse of Mycenae, when Greece was emerging from its long night. He was the greatest of a long line of bards, the one who took countless variations on the ancient legends and coalesced them into one great masterwork. It may be hard to imagine now, but Homer must once have wowed his audiences with poetry set to music that probably sounded something like this.
O that Odisseia megalitora en donet et men alloye factis klekathemenos en fapa.
For the next great Greek civilization, the Greece of Socrates and Plato, history began with Homer's poem about a war at Troy. The poems taught this disparate and often warring group of peoples and city-states the exploits of their heroes and the wisdom of their culture. Greek authors quoted them much as moderns quote the Bible and Shakespeare. Like the later legends of Roland and Arthur, the Iliad and the Odyssey were literally nation-building myths. Homer might, with more than poetic justice, be called the father of his country. No alphabet had survived those dark centuries between Mycenae and Homer's Greece. It was in his lifetime, we think, that Greeks began to adapt the alphabet of Phoenician traders. Some believe Homer himself may have written his poems down on papyrus. All we can say for sure is that someone did, but papyrus decomposes, and the poems had to be repeatedly copied, often from decaying originals. The stories began to vary widely. Finally, in the 3rd century BC, 500 years after Homer's death, a definitive copy was made by Greek scholars in the Great Library at Alexandria. This version would continue to be recopied in Roman times and down through the Middle Ages. After years at sea, Odysseus wants desperately to get home, but Poseidon keeps him from succeeding. Beset by troubles, he lands at the island of the sorceress, Circe. His men behave badly at her table, and she turns them into pigs. The god Hermes has given Odysseus a potion that makes him immune, and instructs him to sleep with the beautiful witch so that she will return his crew to human form.
Well, I always found it, beautiful and haunting, the magical aspect. But it's funny, too, that Circe turns these men into swine, but not because she's a malicious witch, but because in a way she's dispensing justice. They behave terribly at her table, and in a way she's just metaphorically realizing their inner swine, I guess we'd call it nowadays. In a way they had it coming, and even as a child I relished that part. The sirens may be the more, if you're talking about the seductive vamp, they seem, I guess they're trying to shipwreck these guys. That seems more abstract malice, whereas Circe would seem to be making a sort of crusader's point.
But Circe is only one of several women Odysseus encounters in his wanderings.
Women are very important in the poem. Women see him off on all his journeys, and I think, again, this is another metaphor for the simple fact that our mothers give us birth. They start us on life's journey, and of course the other side of the coin from birth is death. And another thing that Odysseus learns in the poem is that he's a human being, or what it is to be a human being.
Odysseus later encounters Calypso, the goddess, not the dance. That sets off another seduction and another test for our hero. For Calypso offers him immortality if he will stay with her. But immortality isn't all it's cracked up to be. By the way, Calypso's name in Greek means barrier or concealer. What Odysseus is offered is a vegetable existence, a symbolic death. He rejects it, but he either can't or isn't in any hurry to leave, which may say something about our hero.
He spends a year with Circe. He spends a year wining and dining and sleeping with this magnificent goddess. Now, it's true, because of who he is, he was able to rescue his men. But then, his men and he would have been there forever if they hadn't finally griped sufficiently to say, all right, all right, all right. And now he wants to leave. He spends 7 years with Calypso before we find him on the beach weeping about wanting to go home to Penelope. So those are sides of him which I don't find so admirable. I can't say that if I were in his boots, I would do any differently, but I still don't find it admirable.
And so the message that Odysseus is getting is that he should live. He should not ask for immortality through fame or even immortality as the consort of a goddess lonely on an island, such as Calypso offers, but go home and live life and find good things in life and survive as a mortal person. And this is the choice he makes all the way through.